our next speaker, has spent a great deal of time carefully examining the effects of pauses on the delivery and impact of speech. In 2019, he first identified the different types of pauses. That grew and developed, and by 2022, he had published the concept of a pause counter to be used by Toastmasters. In 2023, he presented the power of the pause at the District 2 conference. As he continues to develop and adapt the concept, and today, he is going to present a draft of the Pause Counter 2.0 for your consideration and feedback. Please welcome distinguished Toastmaster, David Hopkins. Famous composer Claude Debussy once said, "The music lies between the notes. The music is the silence between the notes." Speeches are the same way. When we speak, whether you are singing or you are talking, that silence has a really important part of your message. If you've ever looked at sheet music and you look at the staff, you will see that there may be many notes written at any given point. A pianist can play 10 notes or more even at one time, but there is one note that is always written and stands by itself on that staff. That's the rest note. So why is the rest note so important? That gives us an opportunity in our mind to digest what we've heard, to anticipate what we're going to hear. Many other components come in a pause or in a rest note. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why I got to using this idea of a pause counter. We already have an ah counter, right? Why do we need a pause counter? In whitewater kayaking, we have a phrase that we use, and that is, look at the route, not the rock. Look at the route, not the rock. What that means is, when you're paddling through this rapid, if you look at the rock, you're gonna hit the rock. So you look at the route that you want to go, and you're more than likely going to go the place you wanted to be. If we focus on the ah counter, we're gonna know I had 7 ahs and 3 ums in my speech. Great, but how do I go from having those ahs to not having those ahs? And the secret is to focus on your route, not the rock. So if you started thinking about where should I be putting a pause, then you won't find a place to put filler word. Pauses are actually a silent ah, a silent filler word. I've given you all a form. You should already have this on your desk. This is my pause counter form. Everything that I've talked about up till now is the same. Nothing has changed in this pause counter. And the concepts behind it are the same. But you know, this is a new concept to Toastmasters in general. And so you haven't seen, perhaps, where this really comes into play. You'll see that on the back, on one side, I have a list of the different types of pauses. I've noticed that when people have come up here without any instruction, other than what's on the form, on the card, the placard that you have, and really, even when you would read the old instructions, there were some things that were missing. And so what I would get is, people would talk about incidental pauses and call them accidental pauses. Pauses are not an accident. They're actually a part of your speech. No more than saying any other word in your speech. But what we are looking at is how I can make this where it was more meaningful. Rather than getting caught up in the what type of pause it was, what matters more is that you're using them. Just like in speaking, when you use a pause, that is helpful. When you don't use a filler word, that is helpful. We're less concerned in the beginning with why I use this pause, and more interested in using the pause instead of that filler word. So on this score sheet, I would like you to take a look, and in particular, Mike, you will notice on this new score sheet, because you're the pause counter today, that there is a column that has been added right next to the name, and that is common pauses. Before I called them incidental. They're not incidental as much as these are the pauses that are simply replacing ahs and ums and other filler words, as well as what are just simply typical pauses at the end of a sentence or at the end of a thought. Nothing special about these pauses. But they are the crux of most of your pauses are going to be a common pause. Then I have across the board those that are specialty pauses, and I may shuffle these around a bit because we might decide that, some of these pauses, like an audience pause, waiting for your audience to applaud or to laugh, is actually a common pause. You would expect it there. So I'm still working on how I want to balance that out. But the important part is that we're not faulting a pause because it's common, and that's why. This also allows me to bring more attention to these because I called them intentional pauses before. Now I'm calling them specialty pauses. And the intent is that there aren't any pauses that you're not putting in there that you really don't mean to put in there. It's not accidental and it's not on purpose. They're all on purpose. The other component that I've added to this is at the very bottom of this score sheet is a place where you can identify that it says put tally marks for when you're marking a pause. But you'll notice it also says to put in X where there isn't a pause that you were expecting. This segues into another joke that I have, and I didn't want to tell it because I'm going to be telling in the speech, and that is, what is the difference between a good joke and a bad joke timing? The point of the joke is that there should be a pause in there, right? And that is where we're going with this, is that I should put an X on the sheet when I was expecting, in that case, a punchline pause. That's probably the only joke that you can tell that doesn't have a punchline pause. And the reason I say that is every humorist will tell you, stand-up comedian or anything like that, is that what makes a joke funny is not just that you're saying something, but it's the timing. It's not just the timing, but it's when you put that pause before you tell the punchline. Now every time you watch a comedian, and you're going to tell real fast which ones are funny and which ones aren't. You're going to start to detect how that pause comes into play in their presentation. And that is an excellent example when you look at why you want to put pauses in there. Nothing could be more critical than when you watch a comedian. Timing is everything. I'll tell you a little bit about those other kind of pauses. If you're scoring me, we had what I used to call the preemptive pause. There's really only one pause that would fit this, and now I've changed its name to the opening pause, because that's the only time you're going to have that pause, is at the opening of your speech, before you start talking. So you're either going to have it or you're not. You have the thoughtful pause, which is a pause that gives you a chance to think. It also gives your audience a chance to think. The punchline pause I've already demonstrated. The audience pause I've talked about. And that is for a laugh or applause or booing. You might step on that one. Series pauses are when you're trying to get to the final fact of your point. That's a series pause. An emphatic pause is when you pause when you want to tell somebody, this is important. The indefinite pause, which is really good if you were interviewing and they say, well, we're gonna offer you $85,000 a year. And you say, $85,000 a year. What's going through that interviewer's mind right now? Ooh, he doesn't think that's enough. They are going to start negotiating with themselves. You don't have to say a word. When you're on the stage, you will find other places, like you ask a question. Who in here has never been pause countered? This is an indefinite pause. And the idea is that we're practicing it here for other places we can use it in our real world. And then there may be some other pause, which we have yet to come up with or define, that is really relevant. I think I've covered all of the most common pauses, but I know, because just like in music, there are so many different notes, so many different variations, and so many different ways that we can use this word. And mind you, when I write a speech, I write. If you look at my introduction, I put pause for our Toastmasters, right? That is how important that word is in my speech. So, the next time you're pause counter, let's use the new form, and remember to put the X's when they didn't put a pause that you wanted to hear. Mr. Toastmaster.